Hey everyone, and welcome to Might I Add. I'm Kyle Partain, and today we'll talk about the football team's recruiting class, the first ever men's basketball space game, and recap the softball team's opening weekend. Joining me today is HCF's very own Jeff Laux. Jeff, how's it going, man?
It's great to be here. Always a pleasure.
Oh, it's going to be a great show, guys, and we're going to start things off with a little bit of football. Last week, UCF head coach Josh Heupel addressed his team's recruiting class of 2020. Heupel's incoming squad ranks 70th in the nation and just 4th in the American Athletic Conference. Jeff, should the drop to number 4 in the American Athletic Conference be a concern for the Knights?
It absolutely should. I mean, we're number one for the past couple of years, and, we're a premier team in the AAC, the Power 6 Conference, and we need to make sure that we're number one every day because Houston, Cincinnati, Tulsa, all these schools are getting these top-edge recruits, these close to 4-star recruits that Power 6 Conference usually doesn't get. And we're out here still dealing with 3-stars when our schools should be elevating our level of talent evaluating.
It is an interesting point because as of this point, there is no 4-star that has been signed or committed to this class. And it's really strange to see what UCF, it's not struggling as far as recruiting goes, but it's definitely not what it has been. And of this signing class, there are several big names, but maybe none made a bigger wave than quarterback Partain Navarro from Arizona. If Navarro chooses to commit to UCF, he'll be the 5th quarterback on the Knights roster. So, Jeff, what does Navarro bring to the table that no other quarterback on the roster currently does, if there's anything?
I mean, he's an RPO-based quarterback. He said it in his interview with 247 that he wants to come into this offense and run the RPO to the death. I mean, Heupel is going to make him the next prodigy after Dylan Gabriel, graduates maybe his junior year, senior year if he does make it to the NFL. This might be the next guy up.
So you're thinking there is value for a quarterback like Navarro to actually go to UCF, even with the insane amount of talent and positions on the roster here.
I mean, there's always value to add a talented quarterback to the room. You never know if he actually can show out and maybe take Dylan Gabriel's job. There's always a wild card when bringing in a freshman quarterback like Parker Navarro.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I don't think anyone thought DG would be the starter this season, so you never know what can happen with spring training, spring ball. And anyways, a huge part of signing recruits is due to the unique uniforms that teams get to show off. And most notable of those is the Space Game uniforms. And now, it's not just the football team that gets to boast these uniforms. The men's basketball team donned their first ever Space Game unis, and they did not disappoint. The Knights, or should I say Citronauts, took off and never looked back against Tulsa, winning the game 83-75. The atmosphere was electric, and all sorts of fans showed up to the game to support the Citronauts. So, Jeff, how was this Space Game able to kind of bring back the energy and reinvigorate this team and program that's really been struggling and falling off the map this season?
I mean, after making the NCAA tournament, we couldn't see ourselves, losing up to 9 games so far this season, not having a quality win. And we finally got our quality win yesterday. The atmosphere was electric. Darren Green, the freshman, was crazy off the bench, and we actually needed this win to actually make a case for UCF being back on the top.
Yeah, this was a really big one because UCF's had chances, and they've blown these chances every time they've had a chance and opportunity to get a good win. Finally able to, barely held on. But speaking of the game itself, and you brought this up, freshman Darren Green scored a career-high 26 points for the Knights and was without a doubt the best player on the court during the game. So with the inconsistencies that we've seen all season long from players like Dazon Ingram, Brandon Mahan, is it reasonable to expect an increase in playing time for Green, or is this kind of an overreaction to a single game?
This isn't an overreaction, but we shouldn't remove him from his 6th-man spot. He's that spark plug off the bench as compared to Terrence Ross from the Orlando Magic. Last year, we throw him in there. He scored 20, 25 a game. That's what we need from Green. He's a freshman, so he's still super immature in the standpoint of getting onto the court and, impacting the game from the start. But if you throw him in the middle of the game and he can score you 20, 25 points, then that'll be fantastic for this team.
Oh, absolutely. He's a great performance, great energy off the bench. And might I add that Terrence Ross, brilliant. Absolutely love it. Anyways, Green's shooting was not the only thing on fire this weekend. The UCF softball team opened their season this weekend with the Black and Gold tournament. The Knights played 6 games and wound up going 5-1 over the course of the weekend. Throughout those games, the Knights outscored their opponents by a whopping combined score of 38-7. So, Jeff, where has this offense come? Where's this emergence come from?
Justine Molina, she's had 10 RBIs, a home run already, and Carissa Ornelas, 7 RBIs and a home run so far. And I mean, it's crazy because you're talking about us going into the competition on Wednesday against number 1 Washington Huskies. What if we do win? Will we be propelled into the top 5 stage as, a group of 5 team? It's kind of crazy.
It's really interesting because last season the strength of this team was without a doubt the defense. There was some offensive talent, but Ornelas has really stepped up and elevated her game, and that's kind of carried the Knights into what's been a really successful start to the season. And to your point, they get a real test. We'll see just how good they are this week when they play Washington. But like I said, what's even more impressive than the offense was actually the Knights' defense, their calling card defense. The team gave up just 7 runs in 6 games, including 2 different shutouts. It's almost impossible to perform better than the defense did this weekend. But I'm curious, Jeff, what does the defense have to do to maintain this consistency?
I mean, just like you said, consistency. I mean, Brianna Vasquez, she's coming out of the dark, and she played a great game against Clemson and really showed, the depth of their pitching crew. And, I mean, it's once we face off against Washington, we'll see what we're really made of, because playing a number 1 team with one of the best pitchers in the game and playing electric offense, we'll see what our defense is really made of once that time comes.
Oh, absolutely. And that's a really nice point you brought up there. Aaliyah White, obviously the brand name of this Knights defense, one of the best pitchers in the country, but Brianna Vasquez just absolutely showed what she can do in that game against Clemson, which was a shutout, by the way. All right, Knights fans, it's time to take a look at this week's upcoming slate of games. There's a ton of games this week between basketball, softball, and even baseball. Starting off, the men's basketball team is going to host Wichita State on Thursday. The women's basketball team is going to travel to Houston on Wednesday before they host Cincinnati on Saturday in a revenge game. The baseball team is going to open their season this weekend when they host Siena 4 different times between Friday and Sunday. And finally, the softball team is going to host the Washington Huskies on Wednesday before they host the Knights Classic Tournament this weekend. The tournament will include teams such as Iowa State, Villanova, and FAU. All right, guys, that wraps up everything here. Thanks to everyone for tuning in to today's episode. Be sure to tune in on Mondays at noon to see Jarrett Kappelman and the crew to bring you all of our biggest sports content. And of course, you're not going to want to miss our weekly HTF podcasts. Also, be sure to follow us on social media at Hitting the Field to keep up with what's happening here at HTF. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in to today's episode. I'm Kyle Partain, he's Jeff Laux, and we'll catch you next week on Might I Add.